Finally got your first leadership gig, loving the new role, but feeling the pressure of your new responsibilities and all that expectation to perform? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Crossing the chasm from a technical role to leadership, from doing stuff to managing and leading people is the toughest challenge any leader must make. Welcome to the Human Edge Show, the podcast dedicated to help you do just that, successfully cross the doing to leading chasm. Campbell Such here, Chief Chasm Crossing Guide. I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. I want to help you learn those lessons much more easily by sharing my experiences and talking with brilliant people who have already figured it out. You'll get great actionable tips, strategies, and techniques to make the transition so much easier and faster for you. Now let's get to it. Welcome to another episode of the Human Edge Show. Today, I'm really privileged to have Hamish McLachlan and Warren Hughes on the show with me. Hamish and Warren, welcome to the show.
Hi, Campbell.
Thanks, Campbell. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. It's Warren and Hamish are both directors of 1HQ and Affero Ventures. Warren's been obsessed with technology and its implication from a very young age. He's worked in technology design, sales, and leadership, roles across almost every industry in a career that spans over 30 years. Not that you'd think that from looking at them.
Thanks, Campbell.
He's passionate about spending time in businesses that can use technology to grow and differentiate themselves. The last few years have seen Warren focus on improving the innovation options available to small and medium businesses through the founding of 1HQ with his business partners. He sees that New Zealand small and medium enterprises, SMEs, have huge opportunities to improve productivity and growth using technology, but that without this approach, we run the risk of seeing serious GDP erosion. Hamish has significant experience in finance accounting. He's developed an enduring career within the financial services and establishing startup ventures and specializes in business strategy and change management. He's motivated by focusing on how businesses can adapt their business models to more effectively grow and compete with a constantly changing market. Hamish's passions have always been around looking for smarter ways to do business. While there are lots of people with great business ideas and initiatives, Hamish's skill is evolving these ideas into a reality to deliver viable commercial outcomes and growth opportunities. In addition to 1HQ, Warren and Hamish founded Affero Ventures in 2018 to help drive scale into NZ small and medium enterprise businesses. Their aim? Providing both expertise and sourcing capital to great innovative focused ideas within New Zealand who need more than just money to be serious contenders within a fast-changing economy. They've worked with a number of business owners jointly to bring new ventures to life. Lots going on in their lives. So, Hamish and Warren, I'll just kick off by asking you, what's one thing from each of you that not many people would know about you?
I'll start. So from my involvement with technology from a very young age, I tried to link that to starting a business. And while I was at high school, at lunchtime, I would charge kids for entry to a lecture theatre, where I'd provide admission to movies that weren't available within the New Zealand market, and charge a couple of bucks on the way. So that was me combining my love of technology and working a little bit differently to start a little business.
Well, where
admittedly, one that I got in quite a lot of trouble for as a teenager.
I won't ask you about what the movies were. Sure.
It's all pretty above board.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Kids at that age mostly fascinated with scary movies.
And how did you manage to source those?
Well, of course, back then it was all about pen pals, and I had a pen pal who had a parent who worked for a movie distribution business in the United States. And believe it or not, he used to post me VHS tapes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm showing my age.
Yeah. Enterprising from a young age. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hamish, how about you?
Yeah, I was thinking perhaps one of the reasons I'm more hands-on in business. So I grew up on a farm, and so I was always very used to sort of mucking in, helping out, getting your hands dirty with stuff. Interestingly enough, I never went back to the farm. Ended up in a sort of a city and business environment, but it's always held me in good stead. I really enjoyed that period of my life.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I had back in my youth, I was a city boy, but had had an uncle with a farm down in Te Puke, and I used to go feeding out hay and driving tractors. Well, I wasn't driving tractors at a young age, so it's amazing how that experience can just round some things out and help connect you back with the land.
Keeps you grounded. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, keeps you grounded. So just to kind of kick things off, one of the biggest challenges is those early steps that we take into leadership roles when we move into a leadership role. Warren, casting your mind back to your early days of leadership, what mistakes that you, looking back now, what mistakes did you make, or what missteps did you make that you do differently now? And what advice would you give to new leaders moving into those roles, into a new role, to help make that transition as easy as possible and minimize any likely mistakes?
Yeah, so I've made a good amount of mistakes for sure in my career. I think some of the biggest ones that I've learned from are in leadership roles. You're often getting hired by a board or from some senior individuals who are, maybe a little bit disconnected from the day-to-day operations of the business. And often they are looking for a silver bullet, right? So someone, maybe the board has been not particularly comfortable with some of the, maybe with slow delivery or not being able to understand the technology capability within their business and what it's delivering. And so they try to recruit these silver bullets. So there's this belief that if we can find someone with enough broad experience to come in, then this person can fix the situation, right? And so I think a couple of times the mistake that I've made is actually believing that I could be that person. And the reality is that the early days of taking on a new leadership position have got to all be about extending empathy to the existing team, just doing nothing but listening, becoming really embedded in that team and finding opportunities to build trust with the team, because there is always many sides to a story. And often the people that will hire you will have one position in view of how things are working in their business, and the people who are actually doing the work will have a completely different view. And so, that's that idea of being realistic about how much change and how much improvement a single individual can initiate in a leadership role, I think has been very, very valuable to me. The other associated thing that I've learned is, in the past, I've tried to move too quickly. So I've had my ideas of what has worked and what hasn't worked in the past, but I haven't spent enough time in understanding enough of the context of a new business or a new team in my new role to work out what parts of those things that have worked for me in the past would be applicable to the new role that I have and potentially a new employer. And so moving too quickly, not listening enough.
Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting. So in terms of what I'm hearing is two things. One is connection to the team, and the other one is setting the expectations with the people that are bringing you in. That if you think this is a silver bullet, probably not. What's your process for helping to set those expectations early on? Because that's especially for someone in a new role where they're moving into something that they're not familiar with, that might be quite a daunting thing to undertake. What would you suggest someone do to try and set those expectations right and give themselves some breathing space to actually make change that's realistic? Even if there's an expectation that's still going to be driven quickly as it possibly can.
Yeah. Look, I think there's having a reasonably clear process with for the stakeholders who are essentially putting you in this position is important. And, we often these types of conversations, you talk about 30, 60, 90-day plans. But there's setting the expectation that there is an awful lot of listening to do, and the people who will deliver the change in the business are mostly the people who already work in the business. And so there are a bunch of cultural and communication and personality type issues that need to be resolved between the teams doing the work and the stakeholders employing the new leader to lead that team. And so I think setting really early expectations about how much is possible and the timeframes that change is possible in. And also actually going through a period of making sure the successes are called out. So the things that the teams are doing really well, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of boards have a very narrow view around maybe how easy something is or how long something should take. And so providing some explanations around actually these are really complex changes or issues that your teams are already dealing with. And so it's completely normal for these to take longer than you'd like them to take, board, for them to cost more money than you'd like them to cost. And sort of going through a little bit of a period of making sure that that stakeholders within the business see all of the good that is being done, I think is really important.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you. And Hamish, if you can remember the question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I can sort of pick up on a few points there from Warren, because I do think that the listening point is a big one. And listening to, or looking out for the positives as much as the negatives, because we often, as leaders or as management teams, end up focusing on what's wrong, which is actually quite destructive in the culture of those teams, because you're always trying to fix the next thing and fix the next thing. You know, often you forget about all the great successes along the way. I was thinking also then, sort of, rather than just, I definitely agree with what you were talking about there, Warren, but some of the other challenges that new leaders make is ending up going, once they think they've understood everything, you end up making decisions that are popular.
Yeah.
Because you almost, as a new leader, you're trying to perhaps prove yourself or be seen in a more positive light. So you sort of go with whatever the popular decision is, which, that doesn't always work out as well as you might think. You've got to have the strength to perhaps ask the harder questions, and often you'll be more successful by pushing back than just going with sort of the direction that's currently been taken. So I think that strength, and then perhaps consistency of the way you go about leading then also becomes important, because I think often your teams will respect you more if it might be an unpopular decision, but if you're consistent with the way you then move ahead with that decision, it certainly builds respect.
Yeah. You talked about being popular. Is that being popular looking up, or is that being popular looking up into your boss or the lead, the exec team above you, or is that within the team itself making popular decisions, or perhaps a bit of both?
I think it can definitely be both. I think perhaps what is important to think about is to do what's right for the business above what is right for you. Often people put their own hats on rather than, you're in a business, for a reason. You're there to try and improve that business to the best of your ability. So make the right decisions for that business.
Yep.
And sometimes that does mean pushing back when you're communicating up,
as
much as when you're communicating down.
Yeah, and especially upwards in terms of explaining the complexity, because the people that are doing the work probably understand the complexity, or at least the bits that they're involved in. Whereas it's easy when you're looking down into something, just sort of, often I hate hearing the word surely, because it always means to me that someone doesn't quite understand the complexity of something. Surely it'll only take a week. Surely this is it. And so that's perhaps what you're talking about, Hamish, in terms of looking upwards and trying to help them understand the complexity, the risks, the delays, the extra costs, all those sort of things. At the same time, obviously, though, making sure that you're being seen to be fair and reasonable, and what you're telling them is accurate, because that's a challenge, right? Because it's really easy for projects to run on, and that's the classic in the IT space. Projects always take longer, cost more, and don't necessarily deliver all of the stuff that you started with, and that's a really hard place to be, both from a project manager and also who's ever managing the team. So,
I think there's lots of different perspectives in business. A business owner might have a very different perspective to someone who's down doing the work. and doesn't necessarily understand the complexities there, but sometimes the person who's caught up in the detail needs to come out of that detail a little bit as well. So there's sort of that sort of balance in the middle.
Yeah. Warren, you talked before about embedding yourself in the team, and I think you used the word empathy, or at least that's what I heard. Could you talk a little bit about that and what you mean by that and how you'd go about doing that?
So because the majority of the roles, senior leadership roles I've had have been leading technology teams and technology capabilities, it's incredibly important that that you make sure that the teams that you're leading sort of respect your own technical capability and your own technical interest, because I've historically been a very, very hands-on technical person early in my career, building computers or architecture, that sort of thing. And then as you get more and more into senior management and leadership roles, it can be very easy just to become focused on your line of business budgets and KPIs and other things, right? And you lose a lot of the value and mentoring that you can add to developing technical teams, because that's apart from. For me, as far as I'm concerned, there's really only two major things that my teams have wanted for me, leading them, is to be able to provide some level of mentorship around some of the more complex technologies and technology environments I've worked in that would help them develop their careers, and also to kind of hold an umbrella over their heads to protect them from, say, the crap flying downhill. Right. So the excessive expectations for how quickly things should be done or how well they should be done, or that software can be released with 0 bugs or whatever. Right. So you're kind of providing that safe environment where their skills can be developed, their careers can be grown, and they can do the things that they love. And to be able to do that, you need to be able to demonstrate to your teams that you do actually have technology leadership capability that can contribute to them. And so this is, I've always been about sort of building smart companies through building smart teams. Right? And so the way you build smart teams is spending time within those teams and helping making very minor course corrections or suggestions about ways of thinking about a problem or a solution differently, doing that frequently with my teams, as opposed to letting that team work for 3 months to come up with a solution, do a bunch of work, and then having to have a session where it's for one reason or another that the market might have changed, or it may not be fit for purpose, or it might be overly complicated to implement, or whatever. And so just having frequent engagement with the teams, doing at least twice as much listening as I am talking, but just kind of suggesting other things to think of, or different ways to think about a problem. And for me, all of that comes through empathy. Everyone has a much more complicated life, including ourselves, than is obvious in the workplace. And there are so many things. I mean, it doesn't get any more complicated than operating times like this. There are so many other things going on for people that, as a leader, providing an environment where, people can kind of maybe come and forget or put into perspective some of those non-work issues and actually do some things that they love and get some real energy, excitement, and happiness from that, I think is a really big responsibility of a leader. And for me, that is all about empathy.
Yeah. Hamish, any thoughts on that? I see you nodding as Hamish is talking.
Yeah,
I love it when Hamish nods.
Warren's talking.
I do agree. I do agree. It's almost about it's helping to influence your team. So working with them, it's not about sort of forcing decisions, because normally your teams will make all the right decisions. You're sort of working with them to sort of perhaps influence a certain direction or another. And so empowering teams to make decisions is kind of important.
Yeah. It's interesting with coming into a role from a technical, a level of technical expertise as a leader. One of the things that you talked about, Warren, was a risk of getting away from the technology. What happens for a lot of leaders when they move out of a technical role is it's the opposite. And instead of operating across the team, they tend to keep diving back in again.
I think that's a really challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
Whatever technical background you have, it's because it's almost your comfort zone. You think you want to dive back into it because you know it so well. So you've got to really challenge yourself to keep away from some of those topics when someone else is responsible for delivering that.
So how do you do that? How do you do that, Hamish? What's the
It's
approach?
challenging sometimes.
Yeah, because the thing is, you come from a technical role of expertise where you have a way of getting things done, which is to take it on and do it yourself. Whereas when you step into a leadership role, it's not about getting things done yourself, because otherwise you end up limiting the capacity of the team. It's helping getting done stuff through other people. So super important to be able to catch yourself doing that, perhaps. But that's a tough challenge, right? And almost often that needs a little bit of a mentor from outside or a coach from outside, or maybe your boss to help you with that.
Hamish hit the nail right on the head before when you said influence, because it is, I guess, taking your experience and implementing that through influencing teams. I think, as opposed to doing the work yourself. I mean, there's nothing more annoying really to teams where some leader comes in and takes over, or dispenses work that's been done and replaces that work with something else they've done. But it is a balance to be able to, as a technology-based leader, to keep your skills up to date enough where your leveraged experience can provide value to your teams, but to avoid as much doing as possible.
Yeah. So yes, that's right. So you're using your technical skill to be able to help you make really good decisions, but also help the team perform better. Yeah.
The way I do that personally is I have a extensive home lab environment where I can get to be, the 15-year-old Warren, and be very, very hands-on and experiment with some new technologies and that sort of thing. And then when I go into the office, I'm the influencer and the leader, not the doer.
Right. Yeah. So you get your fill of the toys and the tools. That's right. That's one of the biggest challenges for a lot of leaders is people, when they move out of a technical role into a leadership role, is that they miss the toys, miss the tools. And that's that pullback is really challenging.
Yeah.
Hamish, in your career, can you recall the first time that you stepped out of a leadership role where you were leading and influencing a team getting stuff done into a leading leaders role where all of the people that were reporting to you weren't doing stuff anymore, but they are actually leading people to get stuff done, and how you found that and how you made that transition, and how you might advise a leader stepping up from a leadership role into a team into a leading leaders role?
I think for a long while in my career, I was in management type roles with teams beneath me, technical teams. But then I stepped out into my own business. It was that next big step where I was in an environment where I had two other business partners, and we're trying to achieve these business goals together, which is a very, very different environment because you're trying to influence or move forward when you've all quite strong characters, because typically people who move into starting their own businesses have certain traits, are certain quite strong type individuals. So I think the challenge is there where how do you influence another really strong individual with very strong views? Again, there's no straight answer there, because you just have to sort of work it out and try and find ways to connect with each other that you can actually influence a better outcome together than you could individually.
Yes. And then when you step out into a business with partners, so you're influencing across, there's also presumably you have a management team, or over time you build a management team within the organization or a leadership team within the organization. So that at that point, then you're leading leaders presumably. And so that rather than just influencing out, it's also influencing
down. That's right.
Yeah.
And I guess some of the challenges there is when you have a business ownership hat on is making it really clear to the leaders below you actually who is making decisions, because it's wasn't all three of you. Otherwise you end up with sort of this, blended decision. It's never the right one.
Yeah. Decision by committee often is a pretty challenging place to be, right? So
yeah, that's right. And I think that's a common problem in small business, because there's two or three or sometimes more owners who have set this thing up, so they probably know the topic really well, but then trying to evolve beyond just the three or four of you into something that's bigger you need more structure again.
Yeah. If you were a leader coming into a business where there were two or three owners like that, so perhaps like one of your businesses, what would you be saying to those people coming into leadership roles in an organization like yours or like Warren's? How would you advise them in terms of managing up into an environment like you guys, where there are multiple people running the show?
I think that comes back to the point we made earlier, where you don't just make a popular decision. I think you've got to be a strong leader, and that's what businesses should look for in leadership: is strength, pushback, and that's actually a really good thing.
Yeah.
Don't just go in and say and just agree with whatever the board or owners of that business think, because they'll probably appreciate you pushing back or sort of saying, actually, this is probably not quite the right thing to do right now.
Yeah. If they're not getting the answers, that they need, or the questions that they need to be answering for themselves, then they're missing out on stuff, right? So
they're actually hiring leaders for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not just to agree with what they think. It's actually to do the right thing for the business.
Yeah. Warren, any thoughts on that?
Similar thoughts. When you hire people, you go through usually an extraordinarily complex, especially for leaders or managers of teams, a complex process to make sure that they've got what it takes to do the job. And so, therefore, you should expect those individuals to not always agree with you, and to push back on you. And I think as a leader, managing leaders, you want those people to be. I guess you want to create an environment where they can be open and honest about decisions that are made, the effects of those decisions, whether a decision I've made has backfired or is a decision that maybe one of my leaders disagrees with. I think you've got to have a really real trust-based environment that you can have those really difficult conversations, somewhat Hamish is talking about, and not expect any repercussions.
Yeah.
And so it's just got to be, just people talking with people. It's almost, you've almost got to get it to a point where your leaders, it's almost a peer relationship, right? Because I think that's where the best value comes from, is the more comfortable people are in sharing what they really believe, because they'll, regardless of what they say to you, they'll act on their beliefs. Right. And so if they don't agree with an idea or a decision, then they will implement your decision, but you won't necessarily get the benefits from it that you would have hoped.
Yeah.
There is an old Steve Jobs quote that I bring up to everyone, which is basically like, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. You hire smart people so they'll tell you what to do. That's a little bit different nowadays, but it just kind of reminds me that if I'm going to spend all this time making sure someone's the right person for the job, then I need to make sure I give them the space to do the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really powerful. And there's another saying that goes on. I'm probably going to butcher this. That goes something like. Now I've just lost my train of thought, so I'll come back.
It sounds like an edit.
That's probably going to be an edit. Moving right along. No, I know what it was. So the saying is, that goes something like, No, I've lost. God, it's gone again. It must be. I don't know what's going on.
Have you had your coffee today yet?
Yeah, I need some coffee.
I haven't had a coffee.
So, look, we're sort of coming up towards the end, and I just wanted to before we finish off, I just wanted to touch on another piece of the puzzle, which is the leader of leaders and how they help. So someone's a leader of leaders. You've just appointed a new person to the team. Either you've either promoted them from within the team or you brought them in from outside. What should a leader do to help that new leader have the best chance of succeeding and the least chance of struggling and being challenged and feeling like they're not supported? Maybe the whole imposter syndrome thing. Got any ideas around that, Hamish, that might be useful for anyone that's listening to this or watching?
I mean, perhaps when I've been in situations like that myself before, it's really helpful just to understand the entire picture. Because sometimes you come into a leadership role and you go, well, I sort of understand bits of it, but I don't understand all of it. So I think to be a good leader of leaders, you have to really embrace that new leader coming into an organization, share the good, the bad, and the ugly with them, and make them really feel like you're there to support them and work closely together with them. Perhaps that's more about that leader being vulnerable enough to open up to sort of really embrace that new leader coming in.
Yeah, Warren, any thoughts on that?
So generally. What I do is make sure the new leader understands how we're measuring the success, the hard metrics of the role. So just get those hygiene factors out of the way. So it's kind of like, when we catch up every week, to go through any challenges, like a sort of a regular one-to-one, here are the metrics. They're usually my metrics that I need to report up. Here are the metrics that we're interested in, and get those hygiene factors out of the way. And then I'm really, in most cases, really just trying to stay out of the way. So be there for your new leader with advice or supporting relationship building or capability, or to be a sounding board, but to make sure that leader gets to establish their mark and the way they want to work on their team, and that I don't sort of override them or spend too much time early on with that new leader in their team. It's got to be, their people have got to know that the words, the ideas, the way things are done are actually coming from their new leader, not from their leader's leader. That makes sense.
Yes, a good point.
So just staying out of their way is important to me.
Yeah. Yes. So not jumping all over them, but I think
there's sort of interesting balance between feeling supported, you're right, and being left alone.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's a hard balance to find, isn't it? Feeling supported and not being left alone. And that probably comes back, well, I believe it comes back to providing that, for want of a better term, safe environment where you can have those open, robust conversations without fear of reprisal, so that your direct report, who's leading another team, can feel comfortable to come to you and have that conversation, get some good support. Perhaps you disagree with them, perhaps they disagree with you, but at least then they go away with some broader aspect of it and are able to look at it.
And if they don't feel comfortable, make sure that your leaders know that there are alternative methods for them to be able to give feedback about their leader, about their manager, without reprisals. So there's usually a PPC or HR function involved there, or some other way. And for ourselves, we need to be very comfortable that there will be topics that our leaders, our direct reports, just won't or can't bring up with us, and would rather talk to someone else about. And we need to accept and respect that.
Yeah, and make it clear that path's available. And
and it's completely normal.
Yeah, completely normal. That's right. A lot of, in my career, and I know a lot of other leaders that I talk to feel that, that have felt that whole idea of what am I doing here? The whole imposter syndrome thing. So that can be a real challenge of feeling that actually you are there but for a really good reason, and that's because the person that put you there believes that you can do it. Maybe not just yet, maybe in big growth curve, which of course is what it's all about. But you're there for a reason, and not to feel that you can't and to lack the confidence to do it. Just before we wrap up, Warren and Hamish, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have, that you'd like to just finish up with?
Closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts.
One of the things I often think about leadership is it's perhaps way lonelier than you realize. And I think often being, and maybe that's being a leader of leaders type of that sort of role, because often you have to, hold your emotion back, let other people do things, but you're there at the end of the day on your own, trying to hold the whole ship together. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just a reality of some of those roles.
Yeah, and knowing that, what have you done in the past to be able to?
I think surrounding yourself with perhaps mentors or other peers, even from other businesses, who have similar types of challenges, just so you can actually share and get ideas from from not just within the organisation, but from outside of it. That's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, that's powerful. Building a network around you from other businesses out, not necessarily just inside, and making sure you don't feel isolated. Which, when the stress and pressure goes on, it's very easy to do. So that's really powerful. Thank you, Warren.
I think the question you should have asked me was, would you do it again? So 32 years, I've had a bunch of jobs. Almost every time I've taken a new role, I'm quite ambitious. So I've always taken roles that scare me or are somewhat or substantially beyond my capability. And at times during my career, I've thought, actually, I grew up in Cambridge. I was going to be an equestrian vet, look after horses. But what I've discovered as I've got older is that all that anxiety-riddled and worrisome, taking jobs that are too hard, making mistakes and learning from them, they all add up to a different perspective and sort of a bucket of experience that I find quite easy to apply to different situations I work in nowadays. And I think that when I'm working with a business or working with a board, it's pretty easy for me to kind of dip into that bucket and think of, add some value at the time, or think of a different way of looking at a challenge or an opportunity. And if you could combine that, I feel like the work that I've done helping and developing technology teams is, for me as a technology person, sort of one of the most rewarding things you can do with your time. So, maybe 10 years ago, if you'd asked me would I do it all again, I'd probably say no. But now I've kind of got to this point in my career, I'm quite satisfied with all the different tools in the toolkit and the experience, and that's it can help people.
Yeah, isn't it funny how we say you learn more from your mistakes?
Yeah,
I think often when we're more in advisory type roles now, Warren, we come up against other businesses that we even try and say, look, we've done this, we've made this mistake before, don't go down this track. Yeah. People don't actually really listen to you. And they almost need to learn some of those mistakes themselves.
Yeah.
I think I know who you're referring to. When I said that I've been 60% wrong and 40% right, then they started listening. Questioning why I was in the room potentially. But anyway.
Well, look, that's a fantastic way to finish up. Warren and Hamish, thank you very much. Awesome insight, great advice, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show at some point to have another chat. Thanks very much.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, Campbell. Really enjoyed it.
See you later. Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening. If you have a friend or a colleague who would benefit from this episode, please pass the word along. If you have a friend or a colleague who would not benefit, but you haven't been in touch with them for a while, give them a call. iTunes reviews are great to get the word out and to help me create the show that's most useful for you. And if you're frustrated or having challenges or would like some help, guidance, assistance with your first leadership role, then check out integrationcatalyst.com in the link in the podcast notes below. Or pass this on to your boss to nudge them to get you the help you really need to cross the doing to managing chasm and get you powered up on your leadership and management journey. Oh, and if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, hit subscribe. Until next time.